Thanks again for coming tonight. This is an amazing turnout. And I know you all had other places you could have been tonight, but I think it's a reflection of how important this issue is to the people of British Columbia. We know that looking at the surveys that have been done, that the people of British Columbia are really paying attention to the issue of the proposed Enbridge pipeline and tankers on our shores. So, as I said, we want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional territory of the Comox First Nations and thank them for welcoming us. I also want to acknowledge that we have some buttons for sale that are an image that Andy Everson from the Comox First Nations provided to us, gave us permission to use, that shows the teardrop with the oil and no pipelines, and they're for sale at the back. We have a number of community groups, Water Watch, Coal Watch, Sierra Club, and the Communities to Protect Our Coast in the back. So after the presentation, you'll be able to, oh, and World Community, the local sponsor as well. You'll be able to connect with people. And there are some forms that can be filled out to make your comments known to the Joint Review Panel on that the National Energy Board is doing their tour of hearings coming back to our community August 10th and 11th, so just 1 week from now. So without any further ado, because it is such a warm evening, we'll get to the main event. And I want to let you know that Dr. Riki Ott is a marine toxicologist, author, and former commercial fisher. She was one of the first people on the scene at the horrendous spill of the Exxon Valdez, when millions of gallons of crude oil were discharged into the pristine waters of Prince William Sound, Alaska. For 23 years, she's been the voice and face of efforts for justice. She's featured in the award-winning film Black Wave that we showed closing night a couple of years ago at the World Community Film Festival. And that tells the story of the legal battle between commercial fishers and ExxonMobil. She's also going to be featured in a film that we're having at our next film festival in February called Dirty Energy. Because after her work in Alaska, when the BP spill happened, she went to the Gulf and spent time there looking at the effects of the spill and the effects on the environment, the people, and the communities. She's author of 2 books on oil spill impacts, Sound Truth and Corporate Myths, and Not One Drop. So I'll let her tell you more about those books in her presentation. In May 2010, Dr. Ott brought her expertise to the Gulf of Mexico, and she volunteered for a year to expose the public health crisis of chemical illness and to help with local community organizing. And for her work in the Gulf, the Huffington Post named her a 2010 Game Changer, so quite an honor. She's received numerous honors. So some of you have received little pieces of paper. We'll get to that later, but you can use them for fans in the meantime. So without any further ado, please welcome Dr. Riki Ott.
Thank you all for coming, and I know this is like, oh, all right. Opening night of your holiday here, your 3-day weekend. It's my holiday as well, so I feel like we're all in this together tonight. What I'm going to try to do is spend 20 or so minutes sharing the story of the stories that I carry from Exxon Valdez, from the Gulf of Mexico, the BP blowout, where I did spend a year, and then also now from the Enbridge spill in Michigan. I'm on weekly teleconferences with the folks back there. And I'm going to share those stories, and then the other half of the time we're going to kind of flip and look at what the Chinese call, this is crisis, but the other side of the coin is opportunity. So in this crisis is an opportunity to organize and actually figure out what it is that you want in your community. What is it that you want rather than what don't you want, right? And then how can we organize to get what we want? So a little bit of my personal story first. I grew up in the late 60s in Wisconsin. I was 12 years old, 13 years old, in 7th grade, walking to school, and I was the oldest of 3 children. And the robins, the birds, were falling out of the trees, dying. And even a little kid knows that something is really wrong when the birds are tumbling out of the trees, dying. So I went to my father, who, in my kid worldview, was just an ordinary guy. He was a paper salesman. And I asked why. And my dad gave me a dying robin in my hand, and I'm watching this bird in the last stages of neurotoxin shaking. And he explained about the neurotoxin DDT. And then my dad gave me Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which I read it at 13. My father did not stop there. I watched as he called his friends, organized, raised money, raised awareness, and sued the state of Wisconsin, which became the first state to ban DDT in 1971, and then the rest of the nation followed suit. So that was my very ordinary paper salesman father. And he figured out pretty early on that if it wasn't good for the birds, it wasn't good for his 3 children either. And that was his motivation. I carried that story with me, even though I wanted to become desperately a marine biologist after my new hero, Rachel Carson. I left Wisconsin to go find an ocean. And 13 years later of, quote, higher education, I wound up in Prince William Sound. This is Cordova, and totally fell in love with it. I was just going to take 1 summer off. It's been 26 years now, and that reminds me, I'm going to start circulating one of these jars on this side and one of the jars on the other side. Just keep passing them back. These are beach rocks that were collected from a allegedly clean beach in Prince William Sound 20 years after the Exxon disaster. Be sure you take the lids off. Yeah, you gotta take the lid off and see what's left on our beaches. All right, so I started commercial fishing and just stayed. I mean, my 1 summer off became a life. And 4 years later was a knock on my door that we have the big one, which was the Exxon Valdez. And I had not been prepared for the emotional hit that would take on a community. I'd been prepared for the ecological impacts. Very dispassionate as a scientist trained, not at all told what would happen when a community unravels and how that would feel. But when I flew over this wreck, I made a commitment. Well, what popped into my head actually was a thought. I know enough to make a difference. Do I care enough? And I literally flashed back. I thought that was just a saying, flashback of your life, but it really happened. And I saw how my life had sort of moved all this randomness to be have a PhD in oil pollution, basically. And here I was in this remote village, right where this oil spill was. And I just kind of thought, I've been here 4 years. I love it. Where else am I going to go? Where do you go that this wouldn't potentially happen? Where do you draw the line in the sand? And I had my godchildren there, and I decided this is going to be it. And I also decided that I would work upstream of this to help my nation, U.S., basically transition off of fossil fuels in my lifetime. Because as long as we drill, we're going to be spilling. So that was the commitment, and I thought it would be fairly straightforward based on science. Okay, so politicians certainly don't listen to scientists, it turns out. And so I realized that really transitioning off oil it's a moral call. It's a moral call for future generations. It's an ethical call, and it's going to be a popular movement that does this. And so I shifted from the science card leading with that to now movement building, social movement building. This is what it's going to take, and that's why I'm here, because the power really is here in our local communities in a democracy. All right, we're going to talk about that too. Okay, we can believe in it and we can work for it, okay? That's the deal. It's actually a journey. It's never actually an end goal. Okay, 21 years later, the BP blowout in the Gulf, and I actually hid for a week from the media because it brought back all the post-traumatic stress disorder again, and I was like, oh no, I'm not going through that again. And then I started thinking about how much my community learned and what we could share. And when I popped away from the I mode to the we mode, I went, that's it, I gotta go down there and coach the communities what they're in for. And before I lost my nerve, I literally just bought a one-way ticket. Here is now, when I think tankers, these are some of the things I think about and I've written about in some of my books. And betrayal is certainly one of them. Up front, before the tankers start transiting and before the oil starts flowing down a pipeline, there's a lot of promises. And you're kind of at that stage now, where it's all golden and it's all jobs and it's all going to be good. And don't worry, we'll have the safest pipeline and the safest tankers in the world. Don't worry, we'll have a state-of-the-art vessel traffic control system. Trust us, don't worry. Not one drop of oil will be spilled in Prince William Sound. Not one drop. That was Senator Ted Stevens. The oil company said, well, if there is a big spill, we will have the best equipment, materials, and expertise for oil spill cleanup. Don't worry, trust us. Well, it turns out all that looked and sounded very good, but none of it was true. None of it, all right? As soon as the Pipeline Authorization Act passed, boom. Away went double hull tankers, away went state-of-the-art equipment, away went, budget cuts, and there was excuses, but away it all went. And we didn't really realize what we didn't have until too late, right? So what we did have, quote, state-of-the-art, were booms and burning and dispersants. And it turns out that 21 years later, despite all the technology improvements in the field of extracting the oil from the ground, what shows up in the Gulf of Mexico as state-of-the-art equipment? Booms, burning, and exactly the same dispersants that didn't work 21 years earlier, okay? And the example, it's Alaska high and the Gulf. This is actually Louisiana down here. But you can see in the picture that the oil has actually kind of washed under the booms, washed over the boom, and to the point now where the boom is actually trapping the oil onto the marshes instead of protecting the marsh from the oil. Yeah, the whole thing was insane. This is what we're left with. Now, here's a sound. Let's see if this... I take high school students out, perfect, and we dig a hole. The oil flows into this pit. This is 17 years after the Exxon Valdez. 17 years, okay? And, well, you've got the talking rocks. I call those talking rocks because they actually describe the beach's condition better than I. Now, all of our beaches don't look like this. There's definitely lightly oiled, moderately oiled, heavily oiled. But, I mean, how do you think the wildlife fares on beaches that are heavily oiled? I mean, even fifth graders get this, right? Not so good. So now when I think tankers, another thing I think is sick wildlife and ecosystem collapse. What happened in Prince William Sound was there was a delayed collapse that the biologists actually didn't notice until 4 years later in 1993 when the herring, this is herring, failed to return as adults because 4 years earlier the babies and the eggs had all been killed by the oil spill in the oiled beaches. And to this day, the herring still have not recovered. The herring fishery, which was once very vibrant, contributed half to a third of some of the fishermen's income, is closed indefinitely until stocks recover. And we're talking that these permits, we have limited entry system, were worth $300,000, and fishermen are trapped into paying the annual payments, the debt on that loan, on a fishery that can no longer be fished. So that's drawing down, in the end, it's drawing down all their other resources. The fisheries that they do fish, the home mortgages that they have to take out. I mean, it's just, in the end, it was the debt that got us. Actually, almost worse than the oil. in Prince William Sound, it was the oil. Because it's not just us running out there and digging shovels in a pit. Every time the tide comes in, it lifts this oil up to the surface where it's now available for the mussels and the limpets and the periwinkles, the shellfish to suck up like little sponges. And then you've got the birds and the sea otters and animals foraging on this. So there's contaminated food that's going into the ecosystem and pulling things down. There was a cascading effect. So there was two effects of this long-term impacts from this oil. One being the direct killing, which I've already talked about, of the young fish eggs and embryos. We're talking herring eggs oil is lethal at 1 part per trillion. Yeah. We didn't even used to be able to measure that when I was in graduate school at that level. And then the secondary effect is this cascading effect, this trophic transfer through the ecosystem, through the web, the food web. So it turns out herring are one of the basic forage fish of the ecosystem. And when the herring went down, then the whole ecosystem had to kind of adjust to the lower level of herring. And that ecosystem just has not recovered yet. And even things like river otters that tend to eat fast swimming fish were noticed eating things like starfish and stuff. And the scientists were like, what is going on? And it turns out what became of all this is a massive series of studies, which I cover in my first book, Sound Truth and Corporate Myths, which is about biological impact to people and to wildlife. And sort of the synthesis of this science is that it's the black stuff that you're looking at, the ultrafine particles, also known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, that stay on the beaches, that mimic some of our own aromatic, our hydrocarbons in our own body. These are pulled in across our cell membranes, and they jam cell function. So whether it's jamming synthesis of respiratory enzymes, so the little river otters, when they took a breath of air, there's no oxygen. Their blood can't hold oxygen. So they couldn't swim fast and catch fish. Or jamming immune function, jamming reproductive function, jamming DNA coding. I mean, it just goes across the gamut. These PAHs, these polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, are extraordinarily toxic to people, wildlife, birds, fish, mammals. And the deal with the whales, they're very slow to reproduce, of course, so that when they take a hit, it just takes a long time for that stock to recover. But also, it turns out in Prince William Sound, with the orcas are matriarchal. They're a matriarchal group. So we took out killed too many adult females, and the young ones didn't know what to do. Right? So there was a disruption to the entire social structure. Cascading effects. Now, it's only been 2 years since the BP disaster in the Gulf, but already the scientists are starting to measure and observe the beginning of this ecosystem collapse that happened in Prince William Sound. And by that, I mean in the area where the oil was spilled. So in other words, what I'm about to tell you is coincident with the oil. There are shrimp that are coming in, up to 50% of some of the guys' catches, okay, with no eyes and no eye sockets, with babies attached to their heads, with the tumors that some of you can see, fish with these lesions on them that start on the inside in the gut and burn out, tarry substance, with killing the killifish, which are like the herring in Prince William Sound, basic ecosystem, forage fish, and even the dolphins at the apex predators. This dolphin has no eyes and no eye sockets. The dolphins are miscarrying at a rate 6 times the 10-year average. And what we found in Alaska was that with the whales, the orcas, the females that were pregnant and had a high pollution load, contaminant load, dumped it in their babies as a strategy for the female to survive. And I mean, the jury's out what's causing this high loss of baby dolphins. But if it's like Prince William Sound, I'm thinking that the babies took the toxic hit and it was too toxic and it ended up killing them. And I'm going to get into why I think that in a minute, because it wasn't just oil, it was oil plus dispersants. So when I think tankers now, I also think sick people. And Exxon Valdez was I think maybe the first spill that actually attempted to document the health effects on people. I better not get into storytelling or it will be a very long evening. But basically, when you have sick people and when you have sick wildlife, sick animals, and they're sick because of the same chemical, that's the strongest evidence you have that that chemical is a problem. And so we had sick people and we had sick wildlife, right, in Alaska. And the high pressure wash that was done in Prince William Sound turned out the high pressure water hit the oil on the rocks, bounced the oil, these ultrafine particles, up into the air, aerosolized it. So what you see on their rain gear is actually what was in their lungs. They breathed it in, right? No respirators. So there was a handful of lawsuits. Basically what came out of this was occupational asthma. I did some surveys like 13 years later and found that there was a lot of people who were still sick and had just learned to sort of adjust to this. There were people that had died. I mean, what emerged in the 20 years since Exxon Valdez is a whole new field of medicine called environmental medicine, which acknowledges that, so there's occupational medicine, high levels of chemicals cause health problems, illnesses in workers. Now there's a parallel field of medicine that says that if those same chemicals are exposed to people at a lower level but for a longer time, the exact same symptoms will develop, right? That's environmental medicine. Lower levels, longer time, general population. So it's chemical illnesses. So let's go to the Gulf. This is a picture that actually did not appear in the media. It was a thank you from a commercial fisherman who was medevaced off his boat by helicopter for acute respiratory failure. He was a member of the in situ burn team. They were not allowed to wear respirators. All right, the cleanup, well, I try to get that word out of my mind because there is no cleanup of these things, okay? So spill responders, not spill cleanup workers. So the spill responders in Alaska, now the fishermen are trained, and part of the training is you wear respirators, okay? I get down to the Gulf, no respirators. BP actually told people, and this is first-hand knowledge from the fishermen who called me and said, if we wear respirators, we're told our jobs will be terminated. And Miss Rikki, we've had 5 major hurricanes in the past 4 years, and we can't afford to lose this job, so what do? Right? That's the pickle. But anyway, this guy is seriously ill. He gave me that picture. The workers on the beaches, also, of course, no respirators, but they actually have their boots taped to their pants leg. And I sort of did my best tourist act and went up to some of these beach workers and just asked real innocently, why do you have your pants taped to your boots? And they said, well, ma'am, the ocean is contaminated. And I said, well, really? What about all those people swimming? Well, ma'am, we can't talk about that. So people got sick. And the thing about chemical illness is that your body only has so many ways to say you're sick. So that the symptoms for chemical illness mimic the symptoms of ordinary colds, flus, headaches, nausea, dizziness, gastrointestinal upset. I mean, if you breathed oil and your skin turned purple, you would know you had a problem. But a headache, dizziness, oh, that's common enough. You don't think of that. So people got diagnosed with asthma, heat stroke, food poisoning. I know people, when I finally left the Gulf in April of 2011, who were on their 5th or 6th round of antibiotics having no effect whatsoever. And I'm sorry, but you don't have, if it's a biological causation, then antibiotics should have done something. If it's chemical causation, there's another problem. You need a different kind of a treatment. So It turns out that that beautiful white sand beach that you saw those workers on looked fairly normal. There's a graduate student in the Gulf who's a retired Air Force colonel who pioneered using black light or ultraviolet light. It turns out when crude oil bonds with dispersant, it fluoresces. So you can actually see what normally would be invisible under clean light or normal light. So all that melon color orange, this is actually a beautiful white sand beach. And what you're seeing is the oil and dispersant that's really there, bonded to biological tissue, in this case, the bacterial coating of every single sand grain. So people were told the beaches were safe, and they weren't. And people got sick. Now, these are symptoms that are listed as common symptoms of 7 previous oil spills. Medical doctors know people get sick. These are the common symptoms: respiratory problems, central nervous system problems, which are things like headaches, dizziness, nausea, lethargy, fatigue, brain fog, I can't think, skin irritation. So people's soles of their feet and their palms just peeling right off because they were walking on these beaches. And then things like blood, bleeding, weird bleeding from not normal places, okay? So children would wake up in the morning, their pillows would be covered in blood, ear bleeds, nose bleeds, blood in urine, stool. I had one Vietnam vet tell me after a round of spraying in the Gulf of these dispersants that he had the worst night of his life. A Vietnam vet with up all night with blood, vomiting blood coming out everywhere. So there's 2 things here. This is another black light in the top, and what happened was, now we know 2 years later, is that the oil that was on the surface of these beautiful white sand beaches, it's hot, so it leached down. These are the ultrafine particles. And when it got cooler, it recoagulated. And that's that band of orange light that you see, about 9 inches down. And the cleanup work, the spill responders were told to clean to a depth of 6 inches or 8 inches, right above that layer. But that layer is well within the digging range of little children and stuff that were on the beach. And in fact, there was a water sample taken from this pit, and there's the ocean right there, that had oil and tested positive for oil and dispersants. And when I confronted Lisa Jackson, the administrator of our Environmental Protection Agency, about this little problem about dispersants and people kind of all being together, she said, "We don't want to create a panic." And I think the panic meant we need to have the Gulf open for business, and if we have a panic of health, then, then who's going to pay for the economy in the Gulf collapsing? So the betrayal here is about we're all being sold down the river. Our health is being sacrificed for the economy. Right? That's in the U.S. and it's not too far away from here either. So this is more emerging science. This is still this retired colonel. He started looking at human skin. It turns out all the tests that were done through the federal and state agencies were done with dry skin. Oh, I'm sorry, but when you go to a beach, do you really have dry skin for very long? You're waiting. So here is legs. He and his students are out. There was nothing visible on those legs under normal light. You could take a rag and you could wipe the legs. There was nothing on the rag. It just appeared like it was seawater. It was wet skin, okay? This is with ultraviolet light. And again, all those pale patches are where the dispersant is pulling the oil into the skin, through the skin. And so this is why people kept describing things to me as like, I feel like I've been in a bed of nettles. My skin is just on fire. So meanwhile, people are telling me this, and back 2 years, right after this happened, the Florida Department of Health, for example, was saying that contamination via dermal absorption is highly improbable. And Rip Kirby, this graduate student, has now proven that it's not only probable, it's very rapid and very efficient dermal absorption of the oil dispersants through skin. Your Canadian Environment Canada says that the Corexit, one of the Corexit dispersants, Corexit 9500, is 25 times as safe as common dishwashing liquid. All right? It is not. It's petroleum distillates. This is basically like refined oil. I mean, like dissolves like. If you're trying to paint a wall and you're using a water-based paint and you get some on you, you can wash up with water and soap. If you're painting with an oil-based paint, what do you use to get it off? Okay, you have to use an oil base. Use vegetable oil, by the way. But I mean, you know, turpentine, paint thinner. This stuff is well, here's what it is. I have it actually here. It's teratogens, which means it disturbs the growth of embryo, the growth and development of fetuses and embryos. It's neurotoxins, disturbs the entire nervous system. Carcinogens, mutagens, you know, the tumors and this stuff. Hemolysis, it causes breaking apart of blood cells in your body, hence all the internal bleeding. And it's basically a systemic poison. So the problem is that the dispersants and the oil, the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, kind of target the same organs in your body. So it's basically a double whammy. And what we've learned now from the Gulf is that the dispersant acted as an oil delivery system and actually very efficiently pulled the oil into your body, into bodies. Yeah. And the reason I'm going on about dispersants is because we use two in North America, well, US, it turns out, but in Canada as well. They're on your books, they can be used, and if you look at some of your websites, they will be used, and it's the same ones that were used in the Gulf. Corexit 9500 and 9527. What is the US doing now? 2 years after the fact, after the fact of the BP disaster, there's a new report out called the Dispersant Initiative Report, which is done under our Clean Water Act and our National Contingency Plan. And it basically says that one of the key things the scientists now need to key in on is understanding the trade-offs of using dispersants with respect to human health. It's actually in writing. I started first working with dispersants 35 years ago. It was always called a trade-off with ecological health. And now, for the first time, it's human health. They didn't ask us about this. In other words, they're sacrificing us for the economy. All right? That's what's going on here. All right, so now, think tankers, let's go to Michigan real quick. I've done it again. Okay, we're just going to hang on the clock arms, okay? So, tar sands oil. In Michigan, well, here as well, tar sands are not what's being shipped down the pipelines because they're too gooey, right? So they have to be diluted. And they're diluted with chemicals that are either similar or the same as what's in fracking, the drilling, as what's in the dispersants, all right? It's petroleum distillates and liquid chemicals that are proprietary, so you aren't supposed to know what they are, but it turns out it's mostly human health hazards that they just don't want to tell you because they don't want you to know that that's what they're basically napalming you with, right? So it's called tar sands, but plus the dilutants is called dill bit, right? That's what we're talking about here. There's a book that should be required reading at this point called The Dill Bit Disaster. It's an ebook. It's very small. It's packed with a lot of information. So what we're learning, and by the way, this is the pipeline, Enbridge pipeline rupture in Michigan, is that these tar sands disasters are, tar sands is more corrosive, more likely to spill. What we're seeing in the Midwest now is a 3 times leakage rate of this unconventional oil, of this tar sands oil, compared to conventional crude oil, 3 times higher with the tar sands. It's very corrosive. It's like liquid sandpaper, right? If you compare 10 years, U.S. spills, about 9% of our spills are due to corrosion. Here in Alberta, actually, in your pipeline system, which is carrying more of the tar sands, it's 46%. So it's about 26 times higher, and it's the corrosion. It's from the tar sands itself. They're more costly to respond to because the tar sands are concentrated with the heavy oil, the particulates, so it tends to sink and then stick. More difficult to clean, in quotes, and they're more damaging. They're concentrated in this, well, they're more damaging because, number one, the tar sands itself is more concentrated with the heavy particulates. And then the dilutants are toxic in and of themselves. So you've got this package of toxins. And unfortunately, Canada and the US are kind of doing the same thing where we're loosening up the health protections and the environmental protections to allow this project to go forward. And in the US, basically, we have a law that passed in January that does not enforce the deadlines for pipeline repairs. So we've got new pipelines being built without even fixing the old ones. Oh, by the way, well, I think I'll get to that in a minute, how much pipeline we're talking about. And then secondly, oh, no, it's not so important that the people who are shipping the oil actually say what's in it, what the pollutants are. That's not required either. So you get sick, you go to your doctor says, what were you exposed to? I don't know. And then you get this sort of myth propagated that tar sands aren't toxic because the doctors don't know what's in them, so they can't tie it to the tar sands. It's crazy. All right, so here is a clip from Michigan. This is a collage of different voices of Michigan people. It's silent for about the first 30 seconds. And I think I'm going to read it because also oil was at residents' back door, and what they didn't clean up, they covered up with dirt, rocks, canvas, and grass. Finding lots of oil 2 years after the spill. This is by a local. This footage is by John Bolenbaugh. Every fish in at least 40 miles of river died. And animals lost their hair.
A deer found in the water?
I don't like Emirates.
Why don't you like Enbridge?
Because they just keep ruining other people's lives.
This is the Michigan tar sand oil spill by Enbridge.
It's just he's a perfectly healthy child, and now he's got all these problems after the oil spill.
Like they're able to do jumping jacks, they're able to do all of these exercises in gym that I just can't do because of the oil spill.
Why are we still getting sick? And they won't give me answers. Oh, it's clean, it's safe, it's this, it's that. Live here then. Tell me it's clean and it's safe. And your company says it's not harmful. But yet, like I said, I'm not going to make it my 50th birthday. I'm 49 years old.
Did they ever try to evacuate you?
No, they said if I go outdoors to stay out no more than 5 minutes.
And he died of a seizure in the house 3 days before she died from cancer.
All right.
Yeah, I got 2 in 1 week at Christmas.
And did you go to the hospital and see your doctor about it?
Yeah.
And what did your doctor say?
She said that's where it came from, the smell. It affected my asthma real bad. And then they had to put me on oxygen.
My memory is absolutely shot.
And you said your lungs are really bad?
Yep, I was just diagnosed with emphysema. They said I had the lungs of an 83-year-old man.
And you were fine before that?
And I was fine before that. And that dog was healthy as a horse until that oil spill. And the other people down here have a dog, and they've been seriously sick. I think a lot of things contribute to the oil spill.
I had to give my children's father CPR myself to save his life. He had 1 seizure in front of the kids at home.
We've had, I believe, 6 people that have died here. We just had another person 2 days ago die at Baker Trailer Park.
I've noticed some problems with my lungs that I never had before.
Right.
Yeah.
And I believe that's from all the chemicals you breathe in.
Yep.
Severe headaches, nausea, fatigue, forgetfulness, all of it.
What was some of your symptoms that you had after the oil spill?
I had 3 seizures at the other house and 2 seizures where I live now.
And then my son actually had a an episode where he looked like he was having seizures, passing out. I even took him to the ER.
I got migraines. I had a seizure.
This is why we have to stop Emmerich and these oil companies from doing this. They're having seizures and they're getting sick from this tar sand oil. Please help us.
It hurts, I know, baby.
Mama.
It's okay, it's okay.
Help me, Mom.
It's okay, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh.
You're all right. All right.
Oh.
Who am I?
Michelle.
The oil and gas industry, the dishonesty that these people possess in the things that they do that are detrimental to communities is almost beyond belief. And they have no compassion whatsoever. They have no honesty. They have no pride. And they're worried about the bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line.
Yeah. So I've seen some of this, so this all flows back when I see this again. Dr. Mike Robichaux is now treating down in Raceland, Louisiana. He is trying to find a way to detox people in a way that doesn't kill them, because when you get this stuff inside of you, it stores in your body fat, not the fat that you want to get rid of, but the fat that your body needs. It packs around organs. It's in your brain. And when you do a detox program, you mobilize that again. You mobilize it back into your body, and so basically you're poisoning yourself again. But he's trying to get this out. The couple that had the seizure, Tracy and Michelle, I'm working with them on a weekly basis. They do not believe, they are not the only ones who do not believe the recent report released by the Department of Michigan Department of Community Health, saying that there no longer is any health risk from the residual oil in Michigan. The residents have said no. In that trailer court where John Bolenball said 6 people have died, 12 people have now died in a very small 2-block trailer court. We're working with University of Michigan students, and we're doing, starting up a pilot health. It's called the Michigan Environmental Health Education Project. So educating people what these chemicals do and what kind of specialty doctors are needed for healthcare. Did anybody hear the name Enbridge is helping pay for this? Did anybody hear the federal government or the state? No. This boils down to you in your community figuring out how to fix the problems that somebody else caused. Okay? Yeah. While you're sick and while your friends are dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you better take good attention to this, because I ended up in the emergency ward twice with grand mal seizures after being exposed to toxic chemicals. Volatile organic compounds that penetrate your blood-brain barrier and go into your limbic system, cause limbic kindling and olfaction, end up in your amygdala.
That's all in sound truth. And here you are. So, okay, so you have people in your community who have been exposed to this, and they know. Basically, the doctors that specialize in treating chemically ill people say that your body is like a rain barrel. And as you get older, drip, 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 you're getting a constant stream of toxic chemicals in from the food you eat, the air you breathe. It's just in our environment right now. I mean, my God, babies are coming in with some 200 chemicals just through the umbilical cord, right? It's unavoidable. Poisons are in our environment. We've allowed that. And the trouble is, drip, 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 suddenly there's something like a tar sand spill where you get like a mega dose and your rain barrel fills up and you become symptomatic. And your body just can't handle it anymore. It becomes overwhelmed. That's what's going on. And so the trick is to try to get this stuff pulled out of your body. But it can wreak havoc coming in and going out. One last bit of bad news is that this also causes this community chaos. There's a lot of uncertainty. When will our beaches look normal? When will we be able to fish again? When will our lives get back to normal? How am I going to fish when there's no fish? Financial uncertainty is one of the biggest triggers of domestic violence, divorces, suicides, substance abuse. So the whole community goes completely haywire, And that's the story that's actually told on the shame pole that was carved by Mike Weber, Eyak native in Alaska. And it boils down to the promises at the top, we will make you whole. Those dollar signs on the pole was spilling money into the community. Were actually painted in his own blood. It boils down to, at the bottom, what makes you whole is the people pulling together and realizing that we're going to do it ourselves. It's after the ecosystem collapsed in Prince William Sound that we realized we can't wait for Exxon to make us whole. We can't wait for the state or the federal government. It's up to us. So that's what we all link together, and there's holes over the heart. We just misheard what Exxon meant when they said, we will make you whole, okay? Yeah. Okay, so here's what we're up against. This is like the bigger picture. We are all tied into this together. This is the Alberta tar sands, and as you know, it's mostly owned by Asia at this point. So the Alberta tar sands is not conveniently located by an ocean, so we have to get the oils north, south, not north, west, east, south, to get it out by tanker to these distant ports. Well, never mind the fact that this makes absolutely no sense energetically speaking, because you're using more energy to produce this and get it places than you're actually extracting by burning it. So never mind all that. I totally lost my train of thought. Anyway, so here's the problem. Okay, I know. This infrastructure that is being proposed right now, we're talking like 16,000 kilometers of pipeline. Okay? And one of the reasons I'm here is because I just don't want to be involved with trying to stop one pipeline, like the one that comes through the States, that will put more pressure on you, on the East pipeline and the West pipeline. We're really all in this. And what we need to do is build something that's at the same scope and scale of what's coming at us, this sort of transnational issue. So here we are moving on, the opportunity to organize. One more point is that after the Exxon Valdez oil spill in Alaska, we passed national law that said, okay, we really have to tighten up our national contingency plan. And part of it included citizen oversight councils, which had quasi-governmental authority to basically demand things like proper towing packages on the tankers. The industry said, what we have will work. Well, it turns out, prove it. They couldn't. It didn't work. Fishermen are trained. We have respirators. So I went to look at what your contingency plan says, just so I would know. And yeah. So I went to the Canadian Ministry of the Environment, and I clicked on the National and Regional Marine Spills Contingency Plan, and got there, and then went to the Pacific Regional Marine Spills Contingency Plan, and found this archive page where the environmental response, the information has been archived because it is outdated and no longer relevant. Yeah, so then I went down to the bottom here, the environmental response plan, just to see if it was there, and I instead got an error page, not found. At all. You have no plan to deal with this. I did find on one of your pages, which I was going to copy, was that the federal government's plan is to leave the spiller in charge, and if things go bad for the health and the environment, then the federal government has a principle of escalation, okay? Which means that it goes to the local communities first to defend your backyard, then it goes to the regional, the provincial, then the last players will be the federal government. So how many of you know anything about oil spill response and are prepared, totally prepared here to defend your coast should there be a multi-million gallon tanker spill? It's going to be like what happened to us. We're fishermen. We're not oil spill cleanup experts. It turns out there aren't any anyway. There's cover-up people, but no cleanup. All right, so let's think now about, instead of what is it that we're afraid might happen to us, this is a lesson from Cordova. When things got as bad as we could have possibly imagined, and I'm actually not talking about the oil disaster, I'm talking about 4 years later when the ecosystem collapsed. And the media was gone, we had a different president, and no one wanted to hear about problems in Prince William Sound. We realized that, okay, the economy collapsed because the ecosystem collapsed. Our economy was definitely tied in with fishing. So now we have nothing. So now that we have nothing, what is it that we want to rebuild? Because now we have an opportunity to actually maybe do something that we want. So what would it look like in an ideal situation? And that's why I passed out those little half sheets of paper. So can you look at your sheets? Now what's going to come of those sheets is please leave them here, okay? And we did this in Nanaimo as well, and there was volunteers there who are going to work this data up. This is actually social data, okay? And university students love this kind of stuff. And we work it up into the beginning of a plan for a vision and what your community likes. Because we want to build an economy that protects what it is that we like and adds to it, not takes it away, okay? So can some of you just sort of maybe read one or two things, and we'll just, just so we can share? Yes?
This isn't a new fight. I was involved in this.
Wait. Read off the paper.
Right off the top of my head and on the radio, I want a hydrogen fuel cell economy led by Canada from the late Dr. Ballard, because he had already, before he died, put hydrogen fuel cells in the new European submarines, which means we can clean up our shipping industry, which is the biggest polluter in the world on commercial shipping. And we can be leading the development of that fuel cell technology in the world's ships.
We're doing the same thing in the U.S. The military shifting off. Thank you. Hydrogen fuel cell economy, but that's not, the question is what's important to you, okay? What do you value? So what, because that's a step to get to protect what you value.
Clean air, clean water.
There you go.
Wild salmon.
Clean air, clean water, wild salmon. There you go. So what are some other ideas? Granddaughters. Family. Okay? What? Biodiversity, okay? The wealth of our living ecosystem. Others?
Leadership with integrity.
Leadership with integrity. Put a dollar value on that.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Untainted food.
Untainted food. Trees on the streets. Local food economy.
Not overpopulation,
Not overpopulation. What's it?
Government.
Honest government. Okay, so listen. Did anybody hear money as any part of that? All right. So here's the problem. Let me not stop on that. We're not going to do the problem quite yet. So this is actually the first step in a visioning exercise that is very, very powerful, and I've been doing around the country. What is it that you like about your community? What is it that you want your community to look like in 20 years? What action steps would you take to get there? And it turns out that what people like, it takes maybe 4 to 6 hours to do this. You have a workshop on a Saturday, everybody has lunch together, and you end up with a prioritized set of values. You have a vision, a common vision, and prioritized action steps. But it turns out that people's values can be categorized into different types of wealth. There's economic wealth, such as, that's the easiest one. That's what people normally think of, all right? That's about jobs, that's about living wages, affordable homes, retirement security. In Native communities, First Nations communities, retirement security means passing on of the culture so that the young will be able to feed the old when the old people can't hunt or fish anymore. or it can be an IRA, right? Whatever. Affordable health care, affordable healthy food. There's environmental wealth. We heard some of that with the biodiversity, with the clean air and the water, with the healthy food. Our life-supporting climate's another one. Healthy ocean, what?
Undeveloped land.
Undeveloped, right, just land, just wilderness. Your great spirit bear rainforest. The social wealth are things that are hard to put a dollar value on. Quality family time. One of the people, the little cards that came back yesterday, said, my wife was listed as something that this person valued. Leisure time, safe neighborhoods, good health. Just, you have good health, and then when you lose it, you realize what you had, right? Education. Political wealth are the freedoms that we acknowledge in some of our constitutions and Bill of Rights. So freedom of religion, freedom of speech, born free and equal. Basically, the political rights are inalienable human rights, whether they are recognized or not by the government. Just because the government doesn't recognize them doesn't mean that you don't have them. It just means that they're not currently being recognized. So these are so important that after World War II and the atrocities that were committed there, the United Nations General Assembly put together a committee on human rights. And Eleanor Roosevelt chaired that, and she said that this was the crowning achievement of her work, which was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that's really worth reading. It's not that long, but it identifies a broad range of social, cultural, political, and economic rights. This is a declaration that does not carry the force of law, but it was split up into covenants that do, and that have been partially ratified by Canada and the US. These are just some of the examples of our universal human rights. So the right to life, liberty, security of person, the right to own property, that's 17. These numbers correspond with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The right to freedom of opinion and expression, that's our First Amendment in the US, as is the right to freedom of peaceful assembly. The right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being. The right to education, the right to participate in the cultural life of the community, which can be interpreted as museums and theater, or it could be the cultural diversity of First Nations community. So what the transition here is that we as humans value more than money, and we value it so much that we've made this rights, and we've recognized, or we try to recognize these rights and codify them into law of the land. That's the transition from our values to our laws. So our laws are supposed to protect our values. Now, what we're finding out increasingly around the world is that somehow, and I'm not going to get into that, okay, because that's a whole other lecture, but these corporations have become, in the eyes of the law, equal to us as people, and so entitled to the same rights, and the rights that they can't get, they're writing for themselves as international trade agreements that then stomp our national laws and our local laws, okay? So what's starting in the US is called rights-based organizing, and this, for example, is the community of Spokane in Washington, which is a citizen initiative that is starting at the local level to say, no, we recognize these rights in our local community. For example, neighborhood residents have the right to determine the future of their neighborhoods. We have the right to a healthy Spokane River and aquifer. We have the right to our healthy oceans, this could be, right? The employees have the right to constitutional protections in the workplace. And the last one's kind of the rub of it all. Corporate powers shall be subordinate to people's rights. Now think a minute, okay? The supreme laws of the land, your land and my land, have said that corporations are equal to persons. So, I call that an illegitimate law. It is just as illegitimate as the initial laws in the US that would not allow African Americans to vote, would not allow women to vote. Those are laws, but they're illegitimate because they counter inalienable human rights. So how do you fix a law that is illegitimate? It's broken. You have to break it to fix it, right? So that's what these communities are doing at the local level. They are writing laws that are illegal. And when we get enough laws at the local level and at the county level and at our state level, and we're active now, I've co-founded a group called Move to Amend the U.S. Constitution. Corporations are not persons, money is not speech. We're active in 39 states now. This activity is going on. This is all illegal. But we claim that what our federal government has done is illegitimate. And the only way to fix it in a little d democracy where people rule is to take our power back here at the local level where we have the most power and push it up. We are actually the government, and when the government runs amok, we are the ultimate check and balance on our government. If we don't defend and demand a democracy, we're not going to get it. And the fact of the matter is, democracy is almost always a work in progress, all right? And I don't think we ever quite get to it. So it's a journey. And I'm afraid that we've, for the past 100 years or so, we've, this age, older, have basically been asleep at the wheel, okay? And it's time now to get out and start doing what we should have been doing all along, which is paying attention and demanding and taking back. If you demand power from the federal government, you are saying that the federal government has power over you. There's nobody to demand of. We have to do this here at the local levels. We have to do this ourselves. Okay? So, oh, right, I remember where I am. Okay, what I call the economy a sovereignty crisis, because the economy reflects whose values. Is it the values of local labor and unions, strong unions, or is it the value of prison labor, where there's pennies on the dollar and these big corporations are basically, we're looking for excuses to arrest people in the U.S. and we have cheap labor. That prison labor, by the way, was what was working on the Gulf response as well. Are the choices, I mean, whose economy? This is, again, is this a human-based economy or is this a corporate-based economy? Whose values are being reflected here? Is it factory farms or is it small farmers? I read that in Canada, 95% of your food is coming from these factory farms. The suicide rate in the US of small farmers is just off the charts. Again, is it poisoning our water, our land, our bodies? Or is it eating healthy local organic food? Whose economy counts here? When the Prime Minister says it's good for the economy, whose economy is he talking about? What's he talking about? And what he's talking about is the gross domestic product, which I think is very appropriately named, okay? Gross. Because it only counts money exchanging hands, no values attached. So the gross domestic product grows by basically destroying social wealth and environmental wealth. And it continues to grow only by doing that. And what some authors have called this is a suicide economy. In the US, it's leading to things. I looked at the United Nations indice where it compares industrialized nations on a series of different achievements. And we're low in the things we should be high in, and high in the things we should be low in. In other words, we're low in things like educational achievement, trust among our neighbors, long life expectancy, gender equality. We're high in things like mental illnesses, teen pregnancies, violent crime, obesity, depression. Great. Is this really an economy that reflects human values? I mean, how many of you want to be depressed because it's good for the economy? You have to buy drugs and medicine, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Or you want to pollute your body so that, you know, you can have chronic asthma and have it be good for the economy because you have to buy medicine. I mean, no. You want to go to prison because it will be good for the economy. So really, our economy, the state of our economy, reflects a sovereignty crisis. Do we want people's values to count? Do we want to protect the things we love? Or is it okay to be money at all costs? Human health can be a trade-off for using dispersants and keeping tar sands flowing. You know, we have choices to make. And increasingly, people are starting to say, no, the society that we want to create, the community that we want to create, should reflect human rights and values. And that's sort of the basis of this transition town movement. It's about taking back our power as a people and building more self-reliant communities, more resilient communities. And so basically that means taking control of the water, the food, the energy, the local energy, and the local economy. And it means diversifying the energy options. This is not about alternatives, okay? This is about energy options. What do we want our portfolio to look like? And in Cordova, we came up with a definition of sustainable. We didn't call it development, okay? We called it sustainable community. And we wanted to bring in businesses that created one form of wealth, social, economic, or environmental, without decreasing the other two. That immediately ended clear-cut logging, okay? It didn't end logging because we started thinking about sustainable forestry. How could we do things differently with the wealth that we had in our backyard? This is called the living economy. And it needs a different measure of wealth and well-being. So does anyone want to hazard a guess at what GNH stands for? Okay. We should call it great national happiness. Yeah, I agree. It is gross, but let's reframe that as well. And this started actually in Bhutan in 1972, and it was almost a joke. I mean, I remember reading about it. It's like, what is that crazy country doing? And that crazy country kept at it. And then Seattle was the first city in North America to pick it up in 1991. And when Seattle picked it up, then some university and academic people got involved, you know, and basically came out with a set of indices such as psychological well-being, physical health, work-life balance, education, cultural and community vitality, environmental quality, material well-being, and domestic governance. And these are a lot of the things that I heard, okay? This more reflects what it is that we as a people value. There's 350 or so communities in the US now that are working on this transition town. And I tried to look up the stats for Canada, and it was a little more complicated than I had time for. So I haven't got there yet. So how do we get there from here? Man, look at the time. Okay, no, don't. We have to create a better story. The power is holding the status quo by a narrative story that we have all bought into. All right, we're going to talk about this in a second. But basically there's a writer that said people do not change with the times, they change the times. And part of this starts with challenging the assumptions. This is what the transition towns are doing. The transition communities are saying, you know what, we don't buy into this oil future. We don't buy into it at all. It's not working for us. Let's vision another way. And there's enough examples out there now with these transition towns, with magazines like Yes Magazine. I'm going to leave a copy here at your library, whatever. Very positive, what people can do. Bioneers.org is another place to look, and you can stream their lectures in. This is about challenging the assumptions, exposing the lies, and amplifying the voices of people that are being hurt, like in Michigan. I mean, how many of you have heard that there was health problems in Michigan? Stomp on that story, because it happened right before the president started pushing the Keystone XL. Very inconvenient truth. All these people in Michigan who are sick, okay? But the key here is offering a better story. You can't just say no to tar sands. That's not going to work to build a movement. You have to be for something, okay? And so what we want to do here is this. It starts actually by changing our minds, all right? And I actually have learned about the Canadian Council, Council of Canadians, that does a lot of training, and skill building to remind people of the democratic arts, okay? How we used to be able to do this. So what are some of the assumptions? Can people just think real quick that we have to buy into now to stay addicted to oil? What are some of them? There is no alternative.
We need the jobs.
We need the jobs. Oh my gosh. Okay?
People are more important than the environment.
Okay, jobs. Jobs versus the environment. Okay? Yep. People are more important than the environment.
The economy more than the environment.
More is better. The economy more than the environment. What about this climate crisis? Do you believe in it or not? No, we can't believe in that. That's a hoax. Okay, so, you know.
Foreign interests will dominate.
Okay, you guys are with me. This is great. Climate crisis is a hoax. Oh, you can't stop progress. Fine, but you can shape it. You can shape it the way you want to go. We have a real democracy. Corporations are persons, money, speech. Okay, jobs versus the environment.
Lobbying runs politics.
What runs politics?
Lobbyists run politics.
Lobbyists run the politics. Well, we certainly bought into that. They don't. We do. So this is part of the campaign building that I do, but I also understand that the Council of Canadians does, is what we're up against is the status quo. And if we think of it as a plank that's held up by pillars, and each of these pillars is a narrative myth that we've bought into, if we start not believing and challenging these, people we elect can fix the problem. Okay, it's not about that. It's about us, right? If we start challenging these assumptions, the pillars that support the status quo start to go away. And when you challenge enough assumptions, eventually the story collapses, but we have to be ready with another one that we want to put in, right? This is what we want. And now, you know, gosh, this is huge. We saw the map. There's like thousands of miles and kilometers of pipeline, and how can we do this? Okay, well, we don't think of it like that. We think of, we are change agents. We want to change the status quo. So our supporters are those who want to change the status quo. The people who are opposed are the people in power who are wedded to the current status quo, all right? You don't have to convince Harper. Forget him, okay? Look at all the people. There's the passive supporters. I mean, I'm sure every one of you can name several friends that went, yeah, I heard about that meeting tonight, but you know, you go and you tell me about it, okay? So work on them first. Work on the people who really don't have a clue, they're not paying attention to what's going on in their own backyard. Start saying, did you see what's happening in Michigan? You know, with the tar sand spill there. When we get, it's about getting enough. It's about getting a tipping point. And when that happens, you know, social movements are very low probability that they actually happen, but all of a sudden they're there, right? All of a sudden. So I want to have one more, I think, video. And this is something called Brower Youth Award. They're youth that are high school students, early college students. This was a 12-year-old when she started. English was her second language. Our children are out there, and we need to be supporting them. So I'm going to see if this works with this. This is rights-based organizing. This is Erica Fernandez. She was a Brower Youth Award winner. She's now at Stanford.
This quote from Cesar Chavez, I always repeat it every time I speak or wherever I go. Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. And you cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. We are the future, and the future is ours. So for me, those are the words of him that inspire me to continue every day.
When Erica Fernandez was 12 years old, she immigrated with her family from Mexico to a farming community near Oxnard, California. One day while walking on the beach, Erica heard about a natural gas pipeline that would soon be built there.
There was this multi-billion-dollar gas corporation, the richest mining corporation in the world, and their proposal was to bring this LNG facility, which is liquefied natural gas facility, 14 miles off the coast of Oxnard. They proposed it to a richer community, Camarillo and Ventura, and they say no. So they added 10 more miles to the project so that it would go around the richer communities and just impact Oxnard. it was going to be floating, but the way they were going to transport it to the land, it was through pipelines. Just bringing that gas to Oxnard would cause a lot of pollution. It was going to affect the marine ecosystem, and the smoke that it was going to produce, it was going to produce over 280 tons of pollutants annually. Oxnard is an agricultural city, and the majority of the people are monolingual Spanish speaking. This community is very vulnerable because they are working in the fields. That means that what they're doing is just working enough so that they could help survive their families. This corporation knew that these people were not going to take the day off to go and protest. They knew that they were not educated, most of them. They knew that it was an easy target.
Erica began to work with the Coastal Alliance and other community groups to organize the protest against the LNG.
We didn't know how much we could do, you know. The idea was to delay the project until we find out more resources, and at one point it was like, oh, we don't have a chance, you know, because I come from a very conservative family, which girls don't have a lot of power. You cannot speak out. You cannot go around and tell how you feel about things. And so first we started like giving talks. Like we would go to neighborhoods and we'd tell them, could you please gather like your neighbors? We would pass flyers, we would have education meetings. When I educated myself and realized, why is it happening in my community? Why cannot we deserve like having a voice and an opinion about what it happens behind our yards? People tell you, you know, you can't do it. You're poor, you're too short, you're too this and you're too that. And so one of the things that I was learning was to believe in myself, to learn that I could do something, that I had a voice. We needed to work together because we knew that this corporation had a lot of money, that they could actually buy a lot of voices. And we knew that our best bet was to have united the whole community, from the poorest to the richest, from all ages and languages or ethnicities. The corporation had an office in downtown Oxnard, and so we would go and protest outside the building. One of the most important things is that the protest was not just people yelling for no reason. They knew what was the final result that they wanted, and the final result was like to say to this corporation to don't come and experiment on us. Don't put our families, our lives on lower than the money.
3 years into the campaign to prevent the LNG pipeline, the California State Lands Commission met to approve or veto the project. As the commission deliberated, thousands of people gathered outside the hearing in downtown Oxnard.
That day, they asked me to represent the youth and to give my testimony. It was this small little Mexican girl, barely speaking English. I could barely put a sentence together. I was in front of this microphone and I just started speaking from my heart. I didn't have any title, any statistics or anything. And after I spoke, it was, the whole room went like so wild. It was incredible. Now my voice was heard. It was worth it, all the effort.
The LNG project was ruled hazardous to the community's health and was vetoed.
I wanted to be the voice for those who thought they did not have one. I wanted to be the hope for those who believed that there was no way we could have stopped BHP Billington. I wanted to be the inspiration for those who believe that a person can make a difference.
Erica's work became the basis for California's Senate bill, which entitles communities to have a say in proposed coastal construction.
There was a development in these communities. We wanted them to be educated, to be empowered, to know that after this, they were ready to battle whatever other struggle they were going to face.
Now studying environmental justice at Stanford, Erica works with SEEDS, a group that introduces local high school students to ecology.
I continue to share the story of success. And I always, when I talk about protests, is that when we think of power, we think of powerful people that step on top of small people, you know? But in reality, in Spanish, poder, when you translate it, poder, the actual meaning is la habilidad de actuar, the ability to act. And when you think, oh, then I have the power. I have the power, tengo el poder de actuar. I have the power to act.
There's no turning back. We will win. We are winning because ours is a revolution of mind and heart. Cesar Chavez. So you have children here who are stepping out and stepping up. And we need to back these children. We need to give it everything we've got. I believe that we're at a kind of a very important crossroads right now in terms of our own survival as a people. So basically there's 3 major things. Learn more yourself, just the way Erica did it. Then share what you're learning with others. Educate yourself. Well, here's some ideas to do that. Read, network, show up to meetings. Movie screenings, I understand Black Wave was shown, Dirty Energy, these are good times for, I could Skype in for discussion points. And school projects, like, there's other Brower Youth Award kids that start as 9th grade projects in science. How could we do things differently? What would our future look like if we, diversified our energy portfolio? Share, do potluck with a purpose, have friends over and show a movie screening, have a discussion. Group visits with other communities, this works. What I'm suggesting here is have people come in from Michigan and talk to you that were directly impacted. Have people come in from the Gulf, from the BP disaster. In China, where they're trying to block the dams, a lot of these dams, there's a movie called Waking the Green Tiger that shows that the people that did get displaced, the nascent environmental organizations went to communities that were not yet displaced and took them by busload to see what the people who had been displaced were doing, which was picking up garbage. And did they really want to live like that? So people connecting with people is very powerful. Of course, there's the letters, the petitions. When you think about, I know the joint pipeline, joint review panel has a process that has a deadline by August 31st. And what I'm suggesting is that, okay, some people are feeling that they're not going to listen anyway, especially after what happened today. But the point is, you're not doing this for them. You're doing this, you're writing a letter to your grandchildren or your children, and you're saying what it looks like now and what your hopes and dreams are for your future here, for their future. And you're going to get it in to the National Energy Board by August 31st, okay? So just reframe it in your mind why you're even doing this. And then organize, plan, and act. Action without a vision is a nightmare, nightmare. Vision without action is a daydream, right? You got to have the vision and you got to be acting. So this is what we're seeing now across the states and across the world is a lot of people realizing that the policies coming down by these giant corporations is going to kill us, right? It's not going to work for us. So people are showing up. That's kind of what what happened at the Occupy. But people need some coaching on how to effectively use their time to be change agents. And so trainings help right now. And I know the Council of Canadians does these kinds of trainings. And get out there and do this kind of rights-based organizing.